Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Dirk and Dietz Timeless Wealth Podcast. A bit of a solemn podcast today, but an interesting one nonetheless. The great investor Charlie Munger passed on yesterday, being November 28th, at the age of 99. And we thought as a bit of a, let's say, respect and just a tribute to him, we talk a little bit about Charlie Munger and some of the affectations that he brought to the world from an investing perspective. So that's coming up next. So, Amy, why don't we talk a little bit about Charlie Munger? Who was he?
So, an American investor and businessman, philanthropist. He was born in 1924, so he went through the Great Recession. Mm-hmm. Best known for being the vice chairman of Berkshire Hathaway, and also being a very close friend of Warren Buffett, who we all follow very closely. But I think what I remember most is his quick wit. I just loved his quick wit and sharp mind, super, super smart, but very dry and just to the point. Like, I love that. He was very funny, but I don't know if he meant to be funny when he was actually being very biting in his wit, but he actually ultimately was. And I loved it.
You know, I remember one time, this is about 3 or 4 years ago, just prior to COVID, and Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger were sitting doing their Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting, and they're on stage, and they take questions from the audience after they report their results and so forth. And they were asked about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, and Warren Buffett went first, and he had a very eloquent manner of describing what he felt Bitcoin to be. Felt it very similar to gold, and had no economic productive value and so forth. And ultimately, basically said, look, he's not a big fan of it. And Warren Buffett, or Charlie Munger replied after Warren Buffett, clearly, Warren, you're a bigger fan of Bitcoin than I am. I call it trading in turds.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. I thought that was really funny. But yeah, he had a lot of great things to say around investing, and he had this ability to really summarize it in a sentence or two that was really impactful. And that's a rare skill that people have. And I think we could share some of those quotes that we found to be
and he came from very humble beginnings, right? So
yep.
he was married, divorced at 29, had 3 kids at the time, lost his son a year after. He was only 9, died of leukemia. Yep. Then eventually did remarry and go on to have, I think, 4 more kids after that. But he was very kind of pragmatic in his thinking. And when him and Warren got together and started talking, and again, he was a big lifelong learner, right? Like big reader and just loved to learn. And that's probably what kept his mind so sharp all these years. And he was 1 month away from being 100.
Yeah, he was. And he was still reading. He was still lucid. He was still active. Rumors, I heard that he would read upwards of 100 books a year, which is crazy. Because I remember 5 or 6 years ago, I read 60 books.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was reading all the time. Any free time I had, I was reading a book. And I only got to maybe 58, I think was the exact count of books. And he got to 100 a year.
Amazing.
Pretty incredible.
Amazing.
So,
well, one of the quotes that I really liked, and we were actually talking about this the other day, when you're an investor, you have to be a bit of an optimist, right?
Yep.
Like not head in the sky, but you have to be optimistic because the world, there's so many horrible things that can happen. You would just constantly sit on the sidelines. And I found a quote, and it made me laugh because it shows his quick wit. And he said this back, I think in 2010, he said, "If I can be optimistic when I'm nearly dead, surely the rest of the world could handle a little inflation." He's just putting it in perspective. It's like sometimes we can blow things out of proportion, but if you kind of get back to it and just, again, focus on the future and how we overcome things and we learn our way out of things.
Well, and he was a big behavioral investor. He believed that your biggest risk as an investor is your behavior. And one of his great quotes is, he talks about, the money isn't made in the buying or the selling. The big money's made in the waiting.
I love that quote.
Yeah.
Read that one again. I like that quote so much.
So the big money isn't made in the buying or the selling. The big money's made in the waiting.
It's the patience, right?
Yep.
And again, going back to, we talk about all the time, the compounding, like that is something they've always hammered the table about. And again, being patient and picking your spots and not just buying cheap companies. It was big on just buying good companies at reasonable prices. and then being patient and letting them execute to their business
what
plan.
they call their margin of safety, right?
Yeah.
And another one, like again, this speaks to his wit, but also there is an element of pragmatism to it as well. He said, words to the effect of, it's more important in life to, instead of being too smart, to avoid doing stupid things.
It's true.
That's basically
It's
what
true.
and it is true.
Yeah.
Because a loss is going to hurt you more than a gain is going to help you.
Yeah.
And oftentimes when you try to be smart, and I'm putting quotations around that, you outsmart yourself and then you get smacked.
Yeah.
But avoiding doing stupid things and just staying alive is actually a pretty pragmatic response to the complexities of life, right?
Yeah.
So
I find him to be hilarious. A really funny guy.
Yeah.
But I think part of what shaped him too was going through the depression, right? Having that mindset. And he talks a lot about, and we read this in Morgan Housel's book about greed and envy, right? And he just said, I was never envious. Like I was always appreciative of what I had and just kind of kept the main thing, right? So,
but equally, he wanted to be a wealthy man.
Yeah.
Like he wanted to have
he did.
wealth.
Yep, he
But
did.
he didn't want wealth so he could buy the expensive car or anything like that.
Right.
I think what he wanted wealth was to buy him time and to buy him independence and give him freedom of thought and so forth versus the material things in life.
Yeah, it's true.
Well, I don't believe, like, for example, if you want wealth or if you want to attain wealth, that doesn't necessarily mean like you're greedy or anything, right? So if he didn't act greedy in any way for sure.
Well, and after his first divorce, like he lost everything. Like he lost the house, he was fine, and then he didn't have medical insurance for his son, and so that again probably shaped his thinking. Is having that freedom and not having to worry about going back to that spot again.
Well, when you look at just people in general, money may not make you happy, but it can certainly pay to make a lot of problems go away.
Yeah,
and so that's a very pragmatic view of wealth. I mean, the one thing Charlie was very much a behavioral investor, and I'll never another time when basically they were doing the annual event for Berkshire Hathaway shareholder meeting, and Warren Buffett was asked, "What's the greatest investment vehicle in the world?" And he famously said the S&P 500. He said, "There's no better investment vehicle in the world for someone to invest in if you're just a regular investor than the S&P 500." And what he mandated was that most active investors are going to underperform that index over time. And he's right. Like probably 75% of active managers are underperforming the S&P 500. And, and he also looked at how the S&P 500's done over many, 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 many years. And again, Warren Buffett's right. I think the S&P 500 since its inception has compounded at 11% per year. But Charlie Munger very acutely, basically expressed to Warren, he goes, "Yeah, Warren, you're absolutely correct. But no one in the world is going to have the intestinal fortitude to stick with it."
It's true.
He said that.
It's
no
true.
one will do it. You're right, but not a single person will be able to buy the
stick with
S&P
it.
500 and hold it nonstop
Yeah.
and not fiddle with it over 40 years. No one's going to be able to do it.
Yeah.
So, and he's right. Most people
Why
can't do that.
did he mean because people, like, when, let's just say, atrocities happen or when major events happen, people will leave the S&P 500 and just leave
the way he worded it is most investors will shoot themselves in the foot at some point over the span of time.
Yeah.
But what he means is they'll get basically overly exuberant when the markets are high, overly despondent when markets are low, make an adjustment accordingly, and it'll be the wrong thing to do.
Yeah.
And we see that all the time, and like even with us as investors. I mean, we're huge, as people know. We own for our clients, the Microsofts of the world, the Broadcoms of the world, and so forth. And in 2022, they had a very difficult year, and it was it was tough to hold on to them, even though our clients were up a significant amount. Prior to that, they were down 30-40%. To not panic and sell out of them was a real gut check, which we didn't.
Right.
Thank God, because they're up 50 to 60% this year. So, and then these are rock solid companies with fortress balance sheets and so forth. I mean, and in fact, Charlie Munger was he was a real influence in terms of Berkshire acquiring Apple. And now Apple's their largest position in their publicly held companies. And, again, the other thing that Charlie Munger was really good at is adjusting Berkshire Hathaway's investment the basis under which they made their investments. Let me word it that way.
Right.
Warren Buffett was very much in the early 70s and even the late 60s. Benjamin Graham, this is how you should invest from a value perspective.
Right.
Charlie Munger, when he joined Berkshire Hathaway, really helped shift Warren Buffett's thinking away from just, well, we have to buy these almost like distressed companies.
Right.
To make money, and so that actually led to, again, Warren Buffett owning, the Costco's of the world, the Apples of the world.
It was just acquiring them at a reasonable price. They don't have to be distressed or completely. It's just let's be reasonable and practical, and just to your point, being patient.
Yeah, and then Munger was instrumental in that.
Yeah,
it's always interesting if you looked at Charlie Munger's net worth. Now he recently, like I'd say in the last decade, gave much of his net worth away. I think at a time of passing yesterday, he might have had $1 billion in net worth. Of course, he accumulated far more than that. I think he was worth at his peak $12 billion. But he never reached the level of wealth that Warren Buffett achieved.
Right.
And a lot of questions are often asked as to why that is. Like, do you have any thoughts or any insight in terms of why that might be?
He was older, and I guess the situation with family going through a divorce that left him kind of behind. So again, the compounding, and he lost some of that time. That probably added up. Well,
it did, and actually, so Charlie would admit that being divorced hurt him. Financially, it set him back.
Yeah,
and he also started 16 years later than Warren Buffett. So that actually accounts for, and that's yet again is evidence of the power of compounding. That 16-year difference between when Warren Buffett started investing with Berkshire and when Munger started investing with Berkshire, ended up being $90 billion difference in net worth, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Maybe even more.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to miss his quick wits and his funny comments and just, again, that practical style of investing. And but I do look forward to, I'm sure that we've seen lots of headlines today, and I'm sure there's going to be lots of commentary that we're going to get, a good refresher of all the wonderful things that he contributed, especially to the investment world.
Yeah, well deserved. And let's not lose sight of the fact that he was one of the great philanthropists of
absolutely
in the United States as well. So gave virtually all of his money back.
Yeah.
Rest in peace, Mr. Munger, and you will be missed.
Till next time.